Hello, everyone, and welcome to the live stream. We'll be starting in just a minute. Just to confirm you can hear me, make sure that you, on the chat, you can just give like a thumbs up or something if you can hear me. We'll be starting shortly, but just to get all the stuff together. So if you have any question, you should be able to use the chat. Everything looks fine from my end, so you should be able to hear what I'm saying, hopefully. Let me double check everything. Yeah, you should be able to see everything. Okay. If you can hear me, use the chat so I can also see if the chat is working correctly, because that is where you can post your questions on the chat. And today we're just going to be going over kind of like a little bit of a differences between different architecture pattern. I'm just going to write something in the chat. There we go. And maybe in the future videos or the future streams, I can go a little bit more deeper into some of the patterns and talk about my experience working with, these Mvvm and MV and, the Redux and the container pattern and all that stuff. Okay, let's see over here. On the chat, nobody's typing on the chat, so I don't even know if you can hear me or not, but let me see. Need to double check everything. Okay. Don't really see anyone right now. That's fine. So on the chat, it will kind of look like this. You can see right the chat right there. If you see the chat window, you can definitely check to see if you can hear me. From my side, it looks everything fine, but I want to make sure that you can hear me and everything is confirmed. Okay, let me post the link somewhere also. Let me go to okay. Okay, everyone can hear me. That is good. Okay, just give me a minute. We're going to start. What's going on over here? Okay, just setting up some stuff. Okay, that's good. Just trying to move some stuff around. I don't know what happened over here. Kind of hard to see in YouTube where the stream is now. Just give me a minute. I'll figure it out. Just trying to see where to go to. There we go. That should be it. Okay. And let me post a link somewhere. Where is it? Okay, everyone, welcome to my channel, and we are going to get started. Okay, a little bit about myself. My name is Mohammad Azam, and I'm an iOS developer. I am also an instructor, so I teach. Apart from that, I also do a lot of Udemy courses. You can go to my website called azamsharp.com, click on the courses, and check out all the courses that are available. Okay, so this particular video will be all about looking at different patterns, different architectural patterns that you can use to build your SwiftUI application. And maybe in the future video, I can go and dive a little bit more deeper into each architecture. All right. Let me know that if you can see the font size, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think, or 4. Let me double check it. How big is that? That should be 24. That should be big enough, hopefully, for everyone to see. So what we're trying to do is we will do a couple of different architectures. We'll try to do Mvvm. We'll try to do MV. I'll show you parts of Redux. We can talk about TCA. I haven't really done TCA, but we can talk about it. And we will also look at the architecture which is known as a container pattern or view-only pattern. Now, which architecture you should use in your application, it kind of depends on the application, so I can't really talk about that. But maybe in the future videos, I can talk about kind of like advantages and disadvantages of architectures so that it will help you choose certain architecture over the other. Once again, if you have any question, you can just type it out in the chat window, and I'll be more than happy to take a look at it. Okay. The application we will be building will be extremely simple, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to consume this API, and that's it. All we're trying to do is to consume the API and display just the title of the product on the screen. That's it. And we're going to use kind of like a different architectures to achieve the same exact goal. Okay. So this is the Platzi fake store API, and this is where you will, it's all fake stuff. I mean, just for you to play around. So we're only going to do a GET request to this particular URL and get the products and then display the products on the screen. And that's pretty much the same exact scenario we will try to do for different architectures so that we get kind of like get a feel of every architecture. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and check it out. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first architecture we'll be looking at will be Mvvm. So I'm just going to type over here Mvvm, which also stands for Model View View Model. This is a very common, actually the most common architecture when you are building SwiftUI applications. All right. In this case, the model, or let's start with the view. The view is whatever you see on the screen. The view model is responsible for providing the data to the view so it can display. And model usually refers to where you have business logic. So, but in our case, we actually don't really have any business logic since we are simply getting the data from the API and displaying it on the screen. So there's really no business logic in our case. It's just a client, meaning SwiftUI app, is simply displaying some data returned as JSON. That's pretty much it. So no business logic. Okay. So if we want to perform Mvvm, we need obviously a couple of things. And this is common for probably for all the architecture. We need some sort of a web service layer that is going to get the data. So you can see over here, I've already created a very simple, plain, basic web service layer. You can see it is called web service. It has a function called get products, and it's going to return you all the products. And that's pretty much it. The product, in our case, is a model. It's basically a DTO, which we like to call DTO, which is called a data transfer object. It's not really a domain model. I mean, there's really no logic in there. It's just a structure that will be populated once the data comes from the JSON service. So that is where you're going to be using this. And you will see that it will remain the same, meaning we are going to use this product structure, we are going to use this web service for all the different architectures. Okay, so now let's go back. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to get the data and we want to display it on the screen. That's all we want to do. So if we are implementing Mvvm architecture, we want our screen to be controlled by a view model because it's the responsibility of the view model to provide the data to the view. So let me go ahead and create a view model. Now, what should we call that view model? Well, you can call it anything you want, but I'm just going to go ahead and call it product list view model. And I'm creating it in one file so that we can easily share it, but obviously you should create it in a different file, not in the same file. The product list view model will be responsible for everything that happens on the product screen, which is the one on the right-hand side, as you can see. What does the product list model is responsible for? Well, to populate the products or load the products. So let's go ahead and create a function, populate products or load products, same thing, whichever one you like. Okay. Populate products is going to call the web service. Now I'm bypassing all of that. Oh, you need to inject the web service as a dependency so you can mock. We're just going to make it simple. Forget about mocking for now. We're just learning about these architecture. So we're not going to mock anything. We're not going to pass a fake or these kind of stub or mock or these kind of things. We're just going to go ahead and create an instance of a web service and going to call the get all products, and that's it. Okay, so no mocking, no nothing going on. Just to get an idea of what these things are. Okay, so let's go ahead and also add async because the web service function is async. Now again, this is not how you will write a web service function. This is just for the demo, by the way. All right, so don't start like hard coding stuff in there. I mean, what if you need a test URL and all that stuff? Okay, so we have a populate products inside the view model, but whenever the data is returned from this web service, it's going to be of type product, the DTO objects, which will be kind of like this. So now we need another view model that will represent the actual product when it is displayed on the screen. So to give you an idea, this whole screen will be controlled by product list view model, but the individual items of the screen, which will represent a single product, it will be controlled by some other view model, which we will call product view model, which we don't have, by the way. So we have to create the product view model. So let's go ahead and create product view model. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and create a very simple product view model. I'm just going to actually copy it. There we go. Let's go ahead and arrange it so you can see it clearly. Here we go. So we have a product view model. You can create it private or something so that it's not available to the view itself. That's fine. But this product view model that we just created is going to represent an actual product, one single product. You can see that in order to create this particular product view model, we need to pass the product DTO or the product model coming from the server, the JSON. And then we return some properties as we want to. So this product view model will be responsible for providing the properties to the view that you want to display it on the screen. So these are the two properties I want, and that's it. Okay. Now the product list view model, which is responsible for controlling the entire screen, will have access to a list of products. So we will go ahead and create a list of products. Products, which will be product view model, and we will initialize it with empty array. So whenever the data is fetched, we have these products. Now these products are basically of type product DTO. We need to map them so that they become product view model. So mapping is not really hard. We can simply call products.map and pass in the product view model.init. Let me go ahead and explain to you what that line actually means. So what this is going to do is it's going to go through an array of products. So this one is actually an array of product, and we are trying to convert it to an array of product view model. That's what we're trying to do. So that is what this line is going to do. It's going to go through each product, and for each product, it's going to call product view model by passing the product to it. So this is going to call basically the official, the default initializer for this particular view model. So now we have all the products. Whenever you have this property products that you want to display it on the screen, you usually mark it with published so that it publishes an event and it tells the view that, hey, you need to update yourself. But another thing to keep in mind is that publish property should only be set on the main thread. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this. Hold on a second. Here we go. Here's with main actor. Main actor is associated with the concurrency in Swift. So it's basically, async and await and all that stuff. And what this is going to do is it's going to make sure that the products property is set on the main thread. So instead of doing, remember that, dispatch queue.main.async, we're not going to do that because now we have a shortcut. We can simply use the main actor, and that's it. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's our code to create a product list view model and our product model. This is the Mvvm approach. How do we display the data? Well, now we have to go to the view, which is right there. Depending on how you want to use it, usually people create state object. State object simply means that it will maintain the state, so it will not get reinitialized again and again. But in this particular very small scenario, it doesn't really matter because, we don't really have any child controls right now. So I'm going to create a view model which will be of product list view model. Product list view model. There we go. All right. And this is saying that the state object, we need to conform to observable object. So we need to also make sure that we add observable object right there. Observable object basically means the object that can be observed. So that is why we have these published properties over here. And observable object protocol can only be used on classes. So you can't really use it on a structure. Okay, let's go back. And now the only thing we need to do is to display it. So list vm.products, and we will go through the product, each product, and product.title. We still haven't called the populate products. That is what we're going to do over here, vm.populate products. But again, this is the async event, so we have to try await, and we also have to capture the error. So if there is any error, capture it. Don't display it on the console, display it on the UI or something, or log it. But that should probably be it. That will be your the Mvvm. And you can see on the right hand side, I have displayed a list of all the data. So we are able to fetch the information from the server, and we are able to display all of this information. All right. Any questions at this point? So if you have been doing iOS development, this might be the most common pattern that you have used. So any questions at this point? All right. If you have questions, you can always use the chat. So make sure that you use the chat and I will be more than happy to answer any questions you have. Okay, let me go ahead and check it out. Okay, doesn't look like anyone has any questions. So this might be the most, common pattern that you have actually used, or it is being used by uh, developers who are doing SwiftUI. Okay, so let's copy all this code, and I'll just make a file, some other file, and I would call it, I'll just create a text file or something so that we don't really mess up anything, and I'll call it content mvvm. And I'll just paste it over there so we have, we have a copy of it, because we're gonna change the same thing. I'm gonna remove this. So this was mvvm, so that is done. Now let's go ahead and move to the close cousin of mvvm, which is the mv pattern. All right, this is also known as the model view pattern. Now, mv pattern, I think it's just a name that people, they gave this name to this particular pattern. I don't think that's like any official name or something. But what mv pattern actually does is that it's removing the view model from the picture. So let me go ahead and remove all this code so we can kind of like start from the beginning. Don't worry, I have already copied everything. So we're going to start from the very beginning. Okay. Okay. So now we're talking about the mv pattern. And mv pattern basically suggests that there is not really any need to create a view model. Okay, so let's create the same exact app, but this time we're going to use the mv pattern. And again, there are so many different variations of mv pattern, so I'll show you a couple of those. It really depends what kind of app that you're building, but let's go ahead and try to use mv pattern in one of the ways. Okay. So this is actually the more common way that at least what I do. If I'm using mv pattern, this is the more common way that I would use it. All right. I'm going to start with creating a model. Not a view model. I'll call it store model because this looks like mostly like a e-commerce website, right? So that's why. Okay, I'm calling it the store model. And it will be exactly the same code that we have written earlier on. So I'm just going to basically copy the code. There we go. It looks pretty much the same thing. Not any difference, right? The same exact thing that we wrote when we were doing mvvm, we just wrote over here. One of the things you will see over here, we don't really have any view models. So what we're doing is we're getting the products, and there's a DTO object, the array of product, and we're just assigning it directly, and that's it. Now, this is where, oops, not receiving enough video just to test it out. Can you guys see, can all of you see the video? I think I'm having some issues now over here. Let me see what's going on. Make sure that YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth throughput and viewable experience buffering. Okay, not sure why it will buffer. Hopefully you're able to see. Let me see. Can you all see the video? Okay. Hopefully you can see the video. I don't know what kind of messages I'm getting from YouTube. Well, some sort of a problem with buffering or something going on. Okay, so let's continue. MV pattern is the second one that we are looking at. And MV pattern, obviously, as the name suggests, is a model and the view. So there is no view model. View model is gone. Okay. It's a little jumpy. Okay. So one of the questions when people look at this pattern is, hey, how is it different from MVVM? It looks exactly the same. You just name your whatever we called it, list view model or product list view model to store model. Well, yeah, it does look like that, right? But the biggest difference between MVVM and MV is if I want to get something else, if I want to add a new product, I'll just create a function called add product. and I will add it. If I want to sort the product, I will just go ahead and do a sort products. All right. If I want to capture the reviews of the products, well, I will just go ahead and create reviews, and this will be an array of review. Okay. If I want to do something else, I will just use the same exact model and I will add the code in there. So that's a big difference. If we were doing this in Mvvm, you will have accompanying different kind of views. We saw a product list view model. We also saw product view model. If I want to add a product, I would see product, what is it called? Add product view model. I mean, if I'm building this screens where you can actually add a product, I will say add product view model, right? And if you can see the details of the product, it will be product detail view model and so on. So you can see that you have to create like 4 or 5 different things. What MV is suggesting is that you don't really need that. In most cases, you don't, because if you can create a store model or whatever common model, then that can accommodate all of your needs. So that's the first thing. All right, a very important thing. The other thing which is easy for over here is, which I found, at least for me, is this will become kind of like a single source of truth. Everything, all the maintenance stuff, all the different properties that are being populated will be part of the store model. Meaning, if I have products, I have over here. If I have reviews, I have over here. So the only interaction of the view will be through this store model, and that's pretty much it. Okay. And the other thing will be that you can create this and you can inject it into an environment, and then it will be available everywhere. So most of the time I actually do end up injecting it into the environment because I actually need that. But let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now, obviously, we don't really have reviews or anything like that, so I'm just going to be using the products. So this is it. This is the code. Let me remove this part. And one other question that I want to answer over here is, what about if I'm building an app and I have this store model? Should I put like everything in this? Well, no, you should not. I mean, for a small and a medium-sized app, that would be fine. That was perfectly fine to put a lot of stuff in there for a medium-sized or even a small app. But as your app gets bigger and bigger and bigger, then you will have to think about something called the bounded context. This is a term that is used in the domain-driven design. Okay? So this means that you can have more of these models, not like 100 of these models, but more of these models. Maybe I can have a model for a catalog that will be responsible for giving me the products, giving me the categories, giving me some other stuff. Maybe I can have a fulfillment model. Maybe I have a model for inventory. All right, but all of these models will be dedicated to providing the objects that they kind of contain. Right now, I have a store model. I have a simple app over here. I don't really need to create 30 other models. I call them aggregate models. So let me go ahead and type it out over here. Okay, so a very good question. Where, with the MV pattern, where is the validating of UI data logic takes place? Okay, good question. Depends on the UI logic, okay? How much logic that you are trying to validate. So let's take a look at an example. Let me clear up this stuff, something, and let me actually write it out over here that we are doing this is the aggregate model, okay? So let's take a look at the example that Tan is saying, that what about the UI logic? Where would this go? Well, first we need a UI, obviously, right? So let's go ahead and create a UI. I'm just going to go ahead and create a very simple UI. Let's say let's say the product name. And this will go in the name property, I guess, or product name, whatever you want to say, field. And let's say the product has some sort of a ISBN number, or product has a price, or I don't know, whatever, name, and let's say ISBN number, whatever. All right, this is kind of like a book or something, I guess. And this will go in ISBN, some sort of a code, okay? Now, obviously, we need to create these properties, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Name, string, 0, something like that. Just creating a simple text field. And we are talking about the UI logic, all right? There we go. Okay, so right now at this point, you can see that we have two text fields. And the question is, well, where should we do the validation? All right. Depends what kind of validation you want to do. Let's say that you have a button over here and you have to say submit. Right now you can see that the button is enabled. It shouldn't be enabled because I haven't really written anything over there. So if I submit the button, well, it's going to just submit these empty things if I'm submitting somewhere. So very basic validation, if you want to do super basic, right inside the view, is form valid. We're talking about this form, right? How do we validate it? Well, if the name is empty, if the name is not empty, and ISBN number is not empty, then you should return that. What about disabled? Well, it's form enabled. If it's not enabled, then you should disable it. There we go. So now you can see my form is disabled. By the way, I'm showing you a very simple example over here. Well, I mean, your question, I mean, your follow-up question can be, well, how about if I want to display an error? How about if I want to display a validation summary? I've covered all of that. I'll show you an article and I've covered all of that stuff. Okay, so you write some, oh man, you see that? I don't know what happened to my simulator. You can see in the Xcode over here, but I can't really type. And if you have a solution, let me know, because this is kind of annoying that I can't really type in the Xcode simulator. I mean, not simulator, Xcode preview. I don't know what happened. Why is it running on my device? Let's use iPhone, whatever. So I have to run it on an actual device. But hopefully you already got the idea of how you can perform a very basic validation. This is a very basic validation, right? Let me see, where is it? So I have to run an actual simulator because I don't know what happened, because it's not really allowing me to edit an Xcode preview, which I have no idea what happened. It's been doing that for quite some time now. So we're going to wait for this. And this validation is obviously quite simple. This is simply saying, I don't know why it's dark mode now. Everything is going weird right now. Toggle appearance. There we go. Okay, so you can see that the submit button is not enabled. If I'm going to type something over here, it's still not enabled because I have to write ISBN number, and now it's enabled. So you can see that our validation is working correctly. Now, if you want to read a little bit more about validation, let me show you an article. I believe I typed it somewhere. If you want to learn more about this pattern, now I would not apply any pattern blindly. It really depends on your application. It really depends what you're doing. Let me see. I think I have some section on validation somewhere. I thought it was over here. Is it? Yeah, this looks about right. Yeah, implementing views, order service. There should be some section about validation over here, or maybe in some other article. I'm just checking. Yeah, you can see the validation right there. And I can link this article, or it might be in some other article that I wrote. And I think I have a YouTube video on that also. All right. So this is the MV pattern, but still, hey, we need to use it. We haven't even used anything that we did, right? So this is the validation thing that we are doing, a very simple validation. But what about displaying the data? How do we display the data? Well, in most cases, when I'm using this pattern, what I would do is I will inject the model, which I like to call the aggregate model, in the environment object. So I will inject it like this, environment object, and I will inject the store model. Not in all the application. I would like to be very clear over here. Not all application you will need to inject it in an environment object. I mean, you can create a state object if you want to. That is perfectly fine. There's so many different ways of doing the same thing. But since my apps are doing the create, read, update, delete, and all that sorting and filtering and all that stuff, it mostly ends up being I inject it inside environment object. And then I can go ahead and access it anywhere I want. Private var store model, which is store model. So this will be simply injected from the environment object. And once you have that, well, the only thing you need to do is to obviously display it. I don't know if I can display a list over here. I have to try. I don't know if the list will display over here. Store model dot products, product in, and then we can display the name of the product, product dot title or something. And let's see, and the same thing goes over here, store model dot populate and blah blah blah. Store model dot populate. Okay, nothing changed over here. This is pretty much the similar thing. Let's see, does it display it? It doesn't display it. Yeah, it doesn't like the list. I wonder if I can use the form. So I'll have to remove this part, I'm sorry. But I will probably have to remove this form over here or comment it out or something. And let's remove this part for now. And let's see. There we go. So you can see it's displaying right now. Okay. So this is the MV pattern if you want to use that. I find it nice and helpful. I mean, I think the most confusing part is that while it looks very similar to Mvvm, it is actually quite similar to Mvvm, as you can see. The only difference is that you don't end up creating view models after view models after view model after view model for every single screen or a lot of screens. And when you pass and it will be easy for you to access the store model if it's part of the environment object. Now, once again, not everything has to be part of the environment object. It really depends on your application, but sometimes it can definitely help in those cases. Okay. Let's take a look at a very different kind of approach. So this is MV pattern. So let me go ahead and copy this in a different file so you can get access to it. Any questions? You can type your questions on the chat and I'll be more than happy to take a look at it. So content view MV. I would say try out all the patterns, all the different patterns that are available and see which one, fits with your needs. Okay. Okay, let's see. Let's take a look at it a different way we can do it. I'm going to remove some of the code and probably remove all of it. Let's go back to the basics. Hello world. Another way to do the same thing, and it really depends. If this is the only view you will display your information, if this is the only view where you will display, the data, the list of products, then another thing that you can do is not use anything but directly call, if you want, directly call the web service. So I will create a state object, private var products. So you can see that this is my view. We don't even need that anymore. So forget about that part. Products, okay. And list of products initially will be something like that. Well, how do I get the list of products? Well, we can use the web service to get the list. So list of products, and we will display the product. So that's the same part. This is actually very similar to how React does it. Task web service dot get all products and assign it to products. And I think it has to be try await and something, right? Yeah. Oops, I don't know what happened over here. Yeah, there we go. And we will do a do over here because it's a throwable thing. And there we go. I mean, that's literally all the code that I had to type. So we kind of like directly went to the web service and got the product. So this is another variation. One of the things in this particular pattern, or if you want to do this, is fine, I guess. The only problem you will have is, well, not really a problem. I think it's for special kind of apps, which are simply getting the data from the web service and just displaying it. So they're not really doing anything. Because now if you want to sort the data, if you want to do something, you will probably have to create a function over here, right inside the view, whichever one you want to call, like filtered data, I guess, filter products. And you will have to do sort products over here. All right. Now, if this is the only view that you have, which will perform the filter products and which will perform the sort products, then it's perfectly fine to implement it over here. There's not a big deal. Yes, you might be thinking, okay, well, how am I going to test it out? I mean, I can't really unit test this. Yeah, that's true. It will be very hard for you to unit test these things if they are become part of the view. The only way to unit test this now is if you write the whole integration test. I mean, sorry, the whole end-to-end test, which is fine. You should always do that, but they are slow. So, sometimes you just want to test the logic of the thing instead of running the whole thing again. So in those cases, it might not be the suitable idea. Okay. So this is kind of like one of the other variations of, I wouldn't even call it MV pattern. It's kind of like a variation of a SwiftUI pattern where you will get the data and you will just display it. Okay. Actually, this can become quite a good segue for us to talk about, let me go ahead and remove this code. So this is very similar pattern to something called a container pattern. Very, very common. Container pattern is very common in React application, in React projects. Container pattern is very, very common. So let's go ahead and see what we are talking about when we talk about container pattern. It's actually very similar to the code that we have already written, by the way. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and say hello world. Okay, so what exactly is the container pattern? A container pattern simply means that you will have a container, a view. So we will have a view over here. We will call it container. And inside the container, inside this view, you will make a call to whatever, fetch the data and whatever you want to do. This is also known as, I think, the view only, but the real name is container pattern. So we will fetch the API right from the view. Okay. And it's going to pass down to another view to display it. That will be called the presentation view or the presenter view. So in this case, the presenter view is the one that is reusable, but the container is kind of like doing the operation, doing the hard job of getting the data, maybe even filtering the data, sorting the data, and the presenter view is the one that is reusable. So this becomes the reusable part, reusable. Let's go ahead and implement this. In our case, the content view will become the container pattern. So this will be the container. Content view is the container. So this means that content view will be responsible for fetching the data, but not displaying it. Displaying the data will be job for some other view. So let's go ahead and create that view. We will call it product list view, body, and this is product list view. Okay. And probably we will go ahead and display product list view. There we go. Now, in the container pattern, which is very common in React application, the container, which is the content view in this case, is responsible for downloading the data. So how do we download the data? We're going to use the same exact approach. We're going to create products. So this is the next pattern that we are looking at, which is the container pattern. So we already looked at Mvvm, MV. Now this is a container pattern. Okay. And now we need to populate this. So let's go ahead and do a task, I guess. And over here, so you can see it's very similar to the stuff that I was doing before. Try await, do. In this way, in this case, we don't have any aggregate model. We don't have any view model. The container is responsible for downloading the data and assigning it to the products, not displaying it. For displaying the products, this needs to be passed down to the presenter view. And that is why it is known as container presenter pattern. All right. What did I do over here? Products. And now the product list view, this is our presenter view, also known as reusable view. I mean, this is reusable. I mean, there is no logic in there. You just pass in the data and then it will display it. So that's pretty much what it's doing. And now we can go ahead and display it just like before, product in product.title. So this is container, presenter, pattern. Container, in this case content view, is responsible for doing the hard job of downloading the data. And the other one, which is the presenter, which in this case is product list view, is just displaying the data. All right. Any questions regarding this? Now, which one do you choose? It's a difficult question because it really depends on the type of the app that you're working on. As you can see, this is actually a very common pattern in React, but you can see the problem with this pattern is the same one. It will be very hard to unit test the logic. If your view has any logic like filtering and sorting and all those things, it will be very hard to test it out because you can't really easily test out the view itself. In order to test out the view, well, you will need to write the UI test, which is also known as an end-to-end test, and then you will have to test the whole thing like that way, and that can be very slow, okay? But if you don't really care about the testing, you're building your own app, and if you are not interested in writing tests, then this can be a quick and easy pattern to use, where you can see that the container downloads the data, gives to the presenter like this, and the presenter displays the data. Very common in React applications, and you can use it for SwiftUI applications also. Keep in mind that this does not mean that every single view must be a container. So we will not be like, oh, container and presenter, container and presenter. No, it really depends. If the content view is displaying some other stuff, I don't know, like reviews, then maybe I would create a review list view. I will not create a review container view, just a review list view. And then the content view can provide the data to the review list view, and the content view can provide the data to the product list view. Okay, it really depends on how the content view is displaying the products and the reviews, I guess. Okay, so this is the container pattern. Any questions regarding the container pattern? It can be used for small apps, the apps that you don't really care that much about testing. If you care about testing, the only way you can test this is by writing end-to-end tests. End-to-end tests, although are great and you should always write them, but for testing out these logics, it's going to take some time to run those tests. If you have a complicated logic and you just want to run a unit test, it might take some while. So that's why good for small apps, but for larger apps may not be the best solution. Let me go ahead and copy this. And again, I'll post it over here. Let's see. So I'll say, if you have any question, you can just write it down on the chat window. Container pattern. There we go. Okay, so that was the container pattern. Let's go ahead and start from the beginning now again to look at a different pattern. Now this is a huge pattern that I'm going to cover, and I think I deleted the wrong thing. And there's no way I can write the whole code for it. So let's take a look at another pattern, common pattern in React applications. And if you're wondering why do I keep saying React applications, well, it's always a good idea to learn from other frameworks like React and Flutter, especially React, because React has been around for a very long time. It has like a 6 years ahead of the race. So a good idea to look at React and how React is doing things, and then try to incorporate those patterns into your SwiftUI, or at least learn from them. Okay. The next pattern we're going to be looking at is a Redux pattern. Now, this is very common when you're building React applications and you want to have a global state. But in SwiftUI, I think that the Redux is already available to you in the form of environment object. I mean, that is kind of like the Redux, the global state. And not global in the sense of completely global. It obviously depends on where you inject it, because you can have multiple environment objects. So Redux, from my understanding, is already there, meaning the global state is already there in SwiftUI in the form of environment object. Okay, but if for some reason you want to implement your own Redux, I'll just copy the code. Well, first we have to look at the Redux pattern, which is all of this. So the Redux pattern is basically saying that your UI, which is your view, if it needs to update the global state, and by global state I mean state that can be viewed, accessible by any view that you want. So if it needs to be accessible, or if it needs to change the state, if it needs to access the state, it needs to do it using the dispatch. If you want to change the state, the dispatch is going to go all the way to the reducer, and the reducer is going to update the global state. Okay. Now, meanwhile, if in that process you're like, well, I want to also get the data from an API and I want to put it in the global state, then that is where the middleware comes into play. So you can already see there are so many different moving parts if you want to implement Redux in your SwiftUI application. And once again, I think kind of like Redux is already built in the form of environment object. So if you want to build Redux, you have to have a very good reason why you're doing that, because it's already kind of built in. Let me see if I can find the code for Redux. Unfortunately, I don't see, not sure what happened to the Redux code. I'm trying to locate it. Oh yeah, there's so much code that you're gonna get scared if I paste it. Okay, let me see if I can paste it over here. See that? That's all the code that I had to write to get Redux kind of like working. So there's a lot of boilerplate code for Redux, as you can see. And this is not, I mean, I don't think this is a complete thing. I still have to create the store somewhere and inject the store. But yeah, I mean, this will take me forever to explain. Let me see, where can I begin? So this is the global store, which means this is the one that's going to be managing the state, or it's the reducer is the one who can update the state. And I think I have some reducer somewhere. Yeah, so here's a reducer that's going to get the products, and then eventually it's going to put the products in the database. Now that's a lot of code, and I don't think I would like to use Redux for anything, because it's a lot of code, it's a lot of boilerplate code that you have to type if you're creating a Redux structure from scratch. That's a lot of code to look at and to maintain, right? So you can have this code if you want. I mean, I'll just copy it, but yeah, it will take me like forever to explain this stuff. All right. Let me go ahead and paste it over here. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, please be sure to ask those questions, and then I'll just call it Redux. Okay. Redux in React, or not in React actually, because Redux is a separate library, but it can be used with React, and people often use it with React to maintain global state. But if you want to implement the same thing in SwiftUI, this is the code that I've written, and there's some other code that I have to write also. But you can see there's a lot of stuff, because we are looking at this big picture over here, and you can already see there's so many moving parts for Redux. All right, you have to do the dispatch action, you have to create the middleware, you have to create the store, you have to create the reducer, you have to maintain the state. So there are already so many moving parts that you will get confused, like, okay, what is going on? And the way or the main purpose of using Redux is that you have one way, which is through the reducer, to update the global state. And when that state actually changes, it is going to tell all the views who are interested in it that, hey, you should go ahead and refresh yourself. Okay, so that's the main purpose of Redux, a global state which can be changed, meaning updated, by being replaced. All right, so that's the main thing. Everything is immutable, so you can't really change it. Uh, so you have to update it completely. Okay. All right. Any other questions? I mean, we covered like a lot of stuff. We covered Mvvm, MV, container pattern. This is a Redux. The final one I want to just show you, and since I haven't really played around with, is the composable architecture, also known as a TCA. I have not really played around with it, so I can't really, talk much about it. But if you look at the code and everything, it looks very similar to Redux, right? So what I think they have done is they have created this framework, composable framework, which allows you to perform things like, dispatching an action and middleware and async actions and all those things, which are kind of like baked in. So if you want to try it out, you can definitely try it out. This is a different thing. I mean, different, repository and different frameworks that you will have to add it to your SwiftUI application if you want to work with that. I have I have not played around with it, so I don't think I can talk much about it, but you can definitely check it out. Okay, and that is pretty much it. That concludes our video. That concludes this session. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. Which pattern to use? That's a big question. That all depends on your app, that which pattern do you want to use. One advice I can always give you is always try to go to, let's say, Data Essentials in WWDC. And this is just one example, but try to go through Apple's implementations, try to go through Apple's code. They have a lot of other sample codes. I think some of the apps, now food truck app SwiftUI. So there are a lot of apps that Apple have done using SwiftUI that you can definitely check it out and learn from them. All right, so one of them is food truck app. This is a app that you can download. Here's the download button, and you can see that how Apple is doing things. All right, and try to learn from it. Try to rebuild the app or rebuild parts of it to find out. Another app is, I think, called Fruta app with SwiftUI. Same thing. Download the app. See, so this is a Fruta app. Let me actually see if I can paste it on your chat so you have a direct link. So that is a Fruta app. This one is a Fruta app. There's also something called, I think, a Scrum Dinger, which is a little bit of a different app. Scrum Dinger app. Yeah, so, and you can actually, this is more of a tutorial, so you can go through the whole thing and try to see what's going on. All right, so each of these apps that Apple have done are a little bit different. So you will learn from them, and try to watch Data Essentials and all these videos that Apple is doing, maybe multiple times, because if what has happened to me also is I watched it multiple times, and then it kind of like clarified that, okay, it how everything is working, and then I was able to kind of like see which one to use, which pattern, which architecture approach I should use to make most of the things, that most of the work that I was trying to do. All right. Okay, that is pretty much it, everyone. Thank you so much. If you don't have any question, if you have any question, you can write it on the chat. But if you don't have any question, thank you for attending. You can also visit my website on azamsharp.com. And if you are interested, you can check out my courses over here. And that is pretty much it. Thank you for coming. And maybe probably in the future, we can host more sessions. All right. So thanks a lot for coming. And I really hope that you have enjoyed it. and you have learned about these architectural patterns, and it's up to you to now, you know, apply those patterns, apply those architectural patterns, and see which one works for you. With the one that worked for me, it's not to say that it's going to work for you. So try out all of them, try out most of them, or try to see how it feels. And I would say try to build a couple of apps and see. That's what I did. I built like a lot of apps, and and I basically calculated or weighed, compared it against different architectural patterns, and then chose one. All right. So thank you all for coming, and that's pretty much it. Thank you all of you for coming.